guys, thank you so very much for clicking on the video today. It's a very special one. Mr. Eddie Whittingham has joined the podcast today. He is the owner of the Clock Tower Bar and Tap Room out in Simpsonville, South Carolina. He is also a part-time employee with us at Green Gridiron. Unfortunately, he has had to take less hours at Green Gridiron, so we get to see him a little bit less. But he did carve out a little bit of time away from his business and from his family to be on the Lopesco's last podcast this week, and I could not be more grateful, and I could not have had a better time. It went as well as you possibly could have hoped. It was so much fun. He is, for those of you who obviously don't know him, which is going to be pretty much all of you, he is a Miami boy through and through. He is Miami Heat, Miami Dolphins, University of Miami. We get into all of that stuff, and so it certainly made for some interesting conversation between a Celtics man and a Heat man. So it was a lot of fun. It was all just so great. And again, thank you so much to Eddie again for coming on the podcast. Hopefully we're going to have him back very, very soon. But for now, you guys hopefully will enjoy this interview with Eddie Whittingham. Eddie, I am so excited that you are here. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. How are you, sir?
Doing good, man. Doing good. Thanks again for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we've been trying to make this happen for a few weeks now, and it just hasn't worked. Weekends just were not the right time for us, but I'm glad we're able to carve out a little bit of time during the week to get this thing done.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm glad to be on here and can't wait to chat Miami sports. Not
and
so the Boston side, just more Miami.
Right. Yeah. No, I won't bore you with our backstory, but no, I know I said this to you off camera, but no pressure. You are the first person to come on here and talk basketball outside of me, and so who knows what people out there think about what I think about basketball. So finally, they're gonna have somebody else to bounce their opinions off of.
Yeah, different perspective doesn't hurt, but no, I'm honored. Thanks again for having me, and look forward to chatting away. Absolutely.
Perfect. So let's just jump right in. We already kind of talked about it. We can all tell from the background of your camera here, you are Miami everything. You're wearing the Dolphins hat. You're wearing the Heat jersey. You got the Heat newspaper clippings and jerseys in the background. Miami Hurricanes. You got all Miami everything. And as somebody who lived in Florida for 14 years, I can completely understand. So jumping right in, this year was a very, very unique year for you guys. I mean, obviously, you had to have a comeback win in the play-in game just to make the playoffs at all. You make an incredible finals run that in hindsight, it's almost like, well, duh. Of course they made that finals run, but, at the time it seemed so far-fetched. What did you see just starting right out once that play-in game happened? Did you see a switch kind of flip, or is that just something that you knew that they had in them all along? They just hadn't shown it yet?
I promise I'm not going to be a homer. I'm not going to tell you that I anticipated that we're going to make it to the finals. We have a group chat with all my best friends down in South Florida, and I said, guys, we're playing with house money. So anything past the first round, just be appreciative. The Heat actually towards the end of the season were actually playing probably one of the worst series of basketball games that you could probably imagine. I mean, they were probably middle of the pack, and then all of a sudden they started slipping and ended up having to beat Chicago. Down by a few points with a couple minutes left. That could have been their season. Jimmy Butler and his crew, turned it on at the right time. And I think the chemistry just gelled at the right time. Not to pick on Jimmy Butler, but playoff Jimmy versus, regular season Jimmy, two totally different guys. And he was on a mission. He's come out repeatedly on local, sport talk shows and newspapers saying that, his number one goal right now is to win a championship. And you can tell by the way he was playing, his average, points per game, the way he was leading the team, the energy. I mean, he was just on a mission to go out there and win a title. And unfortunately we hit Denver and Denver was they're just out of this world. I mean, they were a very, very strong opponent, but what we accomplished on the East or in the East with, beating Milwaukee, New York, and then eventually Boston, I was just in shock. Like I said, I thought we were playing with house money, just trying to soak it all in and enjoy it.
Absolutely. And, for me as a Celtics fan, this is now 2 times in the last 5 years that you guys have beaten us in the Eastern Conference Finals. And so it's a pill that's getting more bitter to swallow the older Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown get. because from our perspective, it's, hey, these guys are super young. They may not know what the heck they're doing yet. They'll figure it out. But you're running up against the same problems every year. What are you seeing as a Heat fan looking at the Celtics in the playoffs? Are you seeing, because I mean, for me, I'm biased, right? Like, I look at the Celtics all year, and when they're not talked about in title contention, despite the fact that we have one of the 2 or 3 best records in basketball, I'm like, I mean, it's just ridiculous. Like, what are you guys doing? Of course we should be in the conversation. Like, that's just stupid. But then the same things keep happening every year. So are you when you look at the Celtics, do you see a really good team, kind of like how I see it, or are you just like, oh well, the Celtics, we got it. Don't worry about that. They're gonna blow it
I,
anyway.
I'm not going to blow smoke and lie to you. I'm going to be honest with you. I was scared. I can't say the word right now, but I was scared out of my wits. Playing against Boston and even Game 7, I swore up and down. I said, we're not winning this game. It's over. We're going to go up there to Boston. We're going to get smoked and we're going to lose. I'm not sure what it is. If I had to pinpoint one thing, I would say probably coaching was the difference between that series. Because from a talent perspective, if you compare the two rosters, Boston is much more talented than the Miami Heat are, without a doubt. You have probably two of the top 3 players within both teams on your squad. So to me, I mean, I thought Boston had home court advantage. Boston had a better overall team. Boston had the overall best player on the court. The only thing you can attribute it to would be coaching. I mean, just maybe making certain decisions, because the shot selections were there. Each team got hot at certain points during the series. The Heat I'm not sure if they wanted it more, but they brought that effort every single game. And to win some of those games, especially even on the road, I mean, you have to tip your hat. I mean, they pulled it off.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. Tip the cap. I know I tweeted this. You might not be aware of it, but I tweeted this halfway through Game 7. I said I would have preferred to get swept than to see this. Like, to be just and I'm sure you would have preferred to sweep than what happened, obviously. But at the same time, for me, I put out videos, and you guys watching at home know I put out videos saying, why would you win Game 4? Why would you do this to me? Because it's every single year you believe, and then playoffs roll around and they completely just self-destruct in one way or another.
Yeah.
And this year, man, whew, I would have preferred that we had gotten beaten by 45 in Miami in Game 4. And then, because then what we would have done is, well, hey, this isn't the team that's going to win it. We don't have it. Blow it up. But instead, you showed that you were the better team, in my opinion, for 3 games.
Mm-hmm.
And you won in Miami twice. And it's like, okay, I mean, if you're going to do this, you better go all the way. If you're going to make me believe again, then gosh dang it, you better believe. And I said this to you, Eddie. You can't say I didn't. I will not buy back in until we win Game 6. Yep. I said that to you. And what did we do? We won the exact amount of games for me to buy back in, and then immediately ripped ourselves in half. Like, that's how it is every year. They win just enough for me to buy back in, and then they rip my heart out every year.
It was a very unique series, because I've watched some hard to watch games when the Miami Heat lost to the Knicks, and when the Miami Heat lost to the Bulls in the in the early 2000s and 90s. I mean, the matches with the Pacers, I mean, grueling. I've never seen, even though I think, if I'm not mistaken, and you know a lot more about this than I do, even when the Warriors were up on the Cleveland Cavaliers, I think it was 3-1. All of a sudden, they just won 3 in a row and won the championship. But for Miami to come out as hot as they did, punch the Celtics in the mouth after what happened last year and the way that the series ended last year, I said, okay, all right, they're motivated. They're going to come out and do their thing. And then it was like a light switch, and you're watching a completely different team. Now you're about to, build some momentum for Boston and, maybe win a game or two. Now you're talking 3 games in a row. And I'm going, okay, Boston did what they had to do. You're going up there to play at home. The crowd's going to be insane. There was no way on God's green earth that Miami had a chance to match that intensity. And for them to come out and be able to play the way they did on the road, win a Game 7, I'm going like, this is just mind-boggling. I mean, Jimmy Butler just literally put the team on his back, and he just tore it up. They really wanted to win. They made the effort to take it to Boston. So, I mean, I don't know what the deal is with the two teams because the rivalry is as hot as it can get. I mean, the fights were left and right, the pushing, the cheap shots. I mean, the trash talking. I mean, it was the best series you can ask for, considering that, in my opinion, I thought Milwaukee and Boston were going to be in that position at that point of the year. So, but no, man. Hey, it's always nice to end up on top. Just stinks we couldn't, finish the job.
And believe me, it stinks for me too, because I'm of the opinion that Jimmy Butler will just continue to do this until he wins a championship, until he's like 45, like he's going to be the 8 seed or the 7 seed and then score 55 points a game in the playoffs until he wins a championship. Like, I feel like just for his own health and safety, just for 1 year, the NBA should go, okay, why don't we just let him win so that he calms down? Because this is getting unhealthy. And it's kind of getting annoying because look, and I'm sure as a Heat fan, it must be maybe not like awesome, because I feel like there's part of you is probably like, oh, I wish he did that all year. We'd be in a better spot. But also, at the very least, when the end of the year rolls around, you have one player on your team that is more likely than not going to show up in the big games. What he did in game, was it 3 or 4 against Milwaukee? I can't remember. He's dropped like 55, hit all those step back threes to and that big comeback win. I watched that game, and it was the first time. So like Milwaukee, I was terrified. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, the Heat are going to get killed. Like they just are. And when I saw Jimmy Butler do that, that was watching that game, it was the first time I went, oh no, I forgot that was the Heat. I forgot that that's Jimmy Butler. I forgot like that they should have beat us last year, quite frankly, and they did beat us in the bubble. Mm-hmm. Like, oh God, I don't want to face them again. Like that was the first moment when I saw him screaming and that fan base just going insane watching that comeback.
Oh, he could have missed.
I feel like it was almost a cathartic experience for you guys. Like, oh no, we can do this now. Like they're showing us we can win this whole thing.
The thing is that the Miami Heat are their foundation, the culture is all based around 3-point shooting and defense. And during the year, believe it or not, we actually had one of the worst scoring outputs of any team in the league. The 3-point shooting was inconsistent, but for whatever reason, when the playoffs came around, they were just lights out, and we were hitting threes left and right, playing solid defense, opportunistic opportunities here and there to score fast break points. So, like I said, the grit was there. They wanted it. I think after the way last year ended, when Jimmy Butler missed a shot and Boston moved on, I think it kind of resonated with them, and it really, it stung a little bit, and they just wanted to come out and prove that they can do it. But like I said, to be honest with you, if I was betting my house on it or the keys to my car, I would have told you flat out Boston's going to win this series. But the fact that they pulled it off, man, you gotta tip your hat. Even though, like I said, the finals wasn't the outcome we were looking for. Again, you got to be proud of that run, because nobody picked Miami as a play-in 8th seed bubble team to come in and say, we're going to take it all the way to the finals and, push game 5, game 6 with Denver.
For sure. And speaking of the 3-point shooting and everything like that, I want to kind of transition a little bit to now, obviously season's over. You went to the finals, ended up coming up short, but honestly, to no fault of your own, I think you guys played about as well as you could have. Denver, quite frankly, I feel like they just had too much. They probably would have won the finals regardless, quite frankly, whoever they faced. I don't think anybody in the East was going to stop them. So offseason rolls around, free agency's over. You lose Gabe Vincent. You lose Max Strus. You lose Victor Oladipo. Now you are, as of right now, you are trotting out a team with Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, Caleb Martin, who, albeit, while he had a breakout Eastern Conference Finals, didn't play well in the finals. I think he kind of fell back down to earth, which, by the way, also infuriates me. Like, why would you do this to me? Why would you just score 10 points a game for your entire career, then for one series against me, score 25 points a game, and then just go right back? Like, did somebody, say something to your mother? Like, I don't understand, what happened? But anyway, that's beside the point. So you're trying out a team with Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler, obviously. Still got Kyle Lowry, Caleb Martin, Josh Richardson you signed. Outside of that, I don't even really know. You still got Duncan Robinson. Your depth, I feel like, really took a hit in the off season, unless there's stuff that I'm just not seeing, like maybe some minor moves that I wasn't aware of. But what are your thoughts about the Heat off season, and how are you feeling going into next season? And even in that space, there's some Damian Lillard conversation going on. Damian Lillard says he wants to play for Miami, but I mean, what do you have to give up? Are you excited about that? Do you want him to come over, even though you'd have to give up everything you have basically as a franchise? Because that's the max. That's the minimum of what it's going to take.
Mm-hmm. Uh, I'd be lying to tell you I wouldn't want Damian Lillard on my team. He's probably
Sure, me too.
behind Dwayne Wade, probably my second favorite basketball player right now. He's amazing. What he can accomplish. I know there's been a little injury history there, but if you're Pat Riley, you're going to sign Damian Lillard, especially when he's selling the entire league. I'm not playing for anybody but Miami. Now, why it's taking as long as it has, I don't know. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the GM is doing his job for Portland and he's trying to get the best return on his investment. However, I think when it's all said and done, Damian Lillard will end up in Miami. But going back to what you were mentioning, I know during the finals, I know during the playoffs, the undrafted stars that the Miami Heat were able to develop, it became an issue, in the sense that everyone kept saying, no, these guys are scrubs. These guys are D-League players. These guys are, they're not that good. But Miami finds a way to make, a diamond out of, garbage. And to be honest with you, to lose, Gabe Vincent, which I thought, right before our eyes, he grew as an NBA player. Max Strus, he was literally a scrub that was tossed around from team to team before he got to Miami, and then he was a starting, small forward. So I think when it's all said and done, they're gonna feel a little bit of a void there. But it's not a situation where I think it's gonna hurt Miami tremendously. I think the Heat right now, from an offseason perspective, need to solidify that Damian Lillard trade somehow, some way. Maybe even add some height. That's the one thing I'll tell you. When we played Boston, we played New York, and especially against Milwaukee, we're a very small team. It's what they call, what everyone usually calls fastball or small ball, not fastball. My apologies. Small ball. And Bam, at 6'9", he's not a terrorizing figure as a center. So I think the Heat, much like what Boston did with Porzingis, going out and getting someone that can solidify the middle and then have Bam, at the 4. I think that's what I would do if I were in their shoes. But, at this time right now, more important than anything else is solidifying Damian Lillard, having him, man the point guard position. You've got Josh now at the 2. You've got some backups here and there, some plug and plays. And once you have a guy like Lillard on your team, it's very easy to fill the rest of the roster spots with guys that maybe might come in, want a chance at a ring, might sign for a veteran minimum contract, and then make another run. But I think there's still a lot that's going to fall into place over the next few weeks, over the next few months, and hopefully it's in our favor.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny that you mentioned Damian Lillard being your second favorite player. He's my second favorite player, too. I actually did a list on my podcast of my favorite players in the NBA. Jason Tatum, obviously, number 1, right? But then Damian Lillard, number 2. I feel like most people that know me would probably be like, well, Jaylen Brown's probably saying, nope. Damian Lillard. There's something about Damian Lillard. Look, I get it. He's injury prone. I get that he doesn't necessarily affect winning like a true number 1, like a Steph Curry, like a LeBron James, like somebody like that can just carry a team. Although we have seen him carry a team to certain heights by himself, but not like championship heights, right? Although very few players can do that anyway in today's NBA. But there's something about Damian Lillard that if he's got the ball in his hands in a big game, that you're in good hands. And for me as a Celtics fan, I'm pretty sure that's going to solve like 90% of our problems. Like at this point, like just having somebody on your team that is not going to completely destroy themselves in the big games. Mm-hmm. Jason Tatum, I feel like doesn't destroy himself in big games unless he's literally injured, which is what happened this year. Unfortunately, now I'm not stupid enough to say that we would have won that game if Jason Tatum was healthy, because I don't think we would have. I think, quite frankly, Game 6 was our Game 7 in their minds. And as soon as I saw them being all happy and hugging and crying, I was like, do they not realize that they have to win another game? But anyway, I love Damian Lillard on the Celtics. That's been kind of rumored too. But I like you said, Damian Lillard's made it pretty clear he's not going to play for anybody else, unless there's some convincing otherwise. But there's also some precedent. Kawhi Leonard said that he wouldn't play for anybody but the Lakers. and then he got traded to the Raptors, and he ended up winning a championship. So I mean, you never know. But yeah, he's my second favorite player ever too, or not ever, but in the NBA too. And I would just be concerned. What are you guys going to give up? Because I don't think Tyler Hero makes any sense on the Trailblazers right now. They've got Simons, they've got Scoot Henderson that they just drafted. You know, they've got Shaden Sharp. I mean, they've got all these guys that are going to be, you know, that are young that need to develop. And if Tyler Hero comes off the bench, he's still taking 25, 30 minutes a night from those guys. And he's on a $30 million a year contract. It just doesn't make sense. And I feel like giving him up's the only way it works, but I don't think the Trailblazers want him. So are you giving up Caleb Martin? Which, I mean, if you would have told me 6 months ago that I would say in a sentence, hey, Caleb Martin could be the main piece in a Damian Lillard trade, I would have flung myself off a bridge, but it's fine. So yeah, no, it is very interesting to think about. All right, Eddie. So we talked about the current state of the Heat, obviously this playoff run and season this year a little bit. I want to ask you a question. It's not going to be a difficult question. It's not going to be a tricky question. It's not a weird, crazy answer to it. Mm-hmm. Is there a better two guard in the history of the NBA outside of Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan than Dwayne Wade, in your opinion?
Absolutely, positively not. I think Michael Jordan still takes the cake. He's at number one. I think Kobe and what he accomplished during his career is definitely at number two. And I think that it's safe to say Dwayne Wade would be at number three as a two guard. What he was able to accomplish not only at Miami, but just overall in his career, from Olympic gold medals to championships to all-star games. I mean, he was just a first class, first ballot Hall of Fame type player that I was actually very blessed to watch play in Miami. His loyalty to the Heat, his play night in, night out. I mean, the guy is he was money. I mean, he probably didn't have the flash and the worldwide name recognition that a Kobe Bryant.
Ironic, because I'm pretty sure that was his nickname.
Yeah, the flash. But at the end of the day, I think from what he's been able to accomplish in his overall career, without a doubt, he's at number three.
Fair enough. And when I wanted to ask you that question, I really wanted to find someone that I was like, well, what about this guy? I can't think of anybody, man. I really can't, which is a little sad just for me, just because I feel like I should at least know the history of the NBA a little bit better. But I mean, man, yeah, I think Dwayne Wade, I think pretty clearly is the number three two guard at this point for sure. Now I know I didn't prep you on this one, I don't think, but is he better than Paul Pierce?
I think we all know the answer to that question. Does Paul Pierce know the answer to that question? Coincidentally, it's funny you bring that up because my wife and I, except for the fact that she came to her senses with the Miami Hurricanes, her and I butt heads with all of our teams. She's a Yankee fan. I'm a Yankee. I'm married into the Yankees, but I'm really a Marlins fan. Dolphins fan. She's a Jets fan. I'm a Heat fan. She's a Knicks fan. And we've had this conversation because she never got attached to any basketball teams except for the Knicks. She'll pull for the Knicks because she's from New York originally. But her favorite player of all time, I mean, if I call her right now, she'll say it on camera, Paul Pierce is her number one player. And I would butt heads with her all the time. But she just loved his confidence, loved his swag, the way that he would take those game-winning shots. She just loved Paul Pierce and what he stood for. But if you compared Paul Pierce to Dwayne Wade, you're out of your damn mind, man. Wade is going to take that cake all day, every day.
Oh, I agree. I just thought it would be funny because, as you were talking, I remembered that whole little fiasco where they kind of got into it a little bit. And Paul
Pierce still did. They still have. Just was it last week with a podcast with Paul Pierce? He was still talking smack about Wade and the years, versus the Heat. And come on, man, just let it go. Just let it go.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, speaking of those years that they were facing each other, there is another gentleman that ended up joining the Miami Heat a little bit later on not later on in Dwayne Wade's career, but obviously after Dwayne Wade kind of started that whole dynasty over there. And that gentleman, his jersey is right behind you, LeBron James. So I want to talk to you a little bit about your perspective on LeBron, because obviously LeBron had a certain reputation when he showed up in Miami, and then it completely changed. He became the ultimate bad guy in the NBA, at least for most fans, right? Maybe not necessarily for Miami fans, but for the rest of basketball, he was the biggest heel in basketball, to use a wrestling term. He didn't know how to win big games before he came to Miami. Learned how to do it there. Eventually went back home, accomplished all his hopes and all his real hopes and dreams, I guess. And now obviously he's the king. So to you, who is LeBron James? What is your lasting memory of him in terms of what kind of player he is and was?
I'm going to hit you from every angle right now because with LeBron James, there's a lot of mixed feelings.
Sure.
On one side, I think what he mentioned after he left, and that was a very painful departure, as far as saying, "Hey, Miami were his college years." I think that's exactly what I think. LeBron James was in high school in Cleveland, his first stint, kind of went to college, matured a little bit, learned the ropes a little bit, gathered himself, learned a lot from the Miami Heat and the culture that they instill. And then he was able to transition that for the rest of his career, winning a championship in LA, and then obviously winning one with Cleveland. But as far as my opinion towards LeBron, I'm not gonna lie to you. I mean, before LeBron joined Miami, I couldn't stand him. I really couldn't. When he was gonna make the announcement, I mean, I was literally on my knees because it was about, I would say, if I'm not mistaken, about a day or two before, maybe a couple days before, when the rumors had started to swirl that Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh and LeBron James were meeting in Miami, and they were seen at the beach and having lunch and all stuff. And I'm going, oh, you're telling me this could happen? Um, like I said, as you can see behind me, around me, I'm a Heat homer. So if you're on my team, I'll support you. I love you. I'll buy your jerseys. I mean, I've got a bunch of. I'm wearing Wade right now, but I bought a bunch of his jerseys. I supported him, loved him. What he was able to accomplish in those 4 years, I don't think people appreciate how good that Miami Heat team was. I mean, the way they played, the chemistry to put these guys together that quickly and to be able to play as well as they did in such a short amount of time. I mean, a lot of people. I mean, even the big three in Boston when Ray Allen and Paul Pierce and Garnett were together. I mean, how far did they go? How many rings did they win? How it's not that easy. I mean, I remember when Carl Malone and Gary Payton joined, the Lakers, going on that run. These power teams and these big threes or big fours, it's not easy for them to put it all together. So the run that the Miami Heat had, as you can see over here, it was special, really, really, really special, and did not take that for granted. But as far as LeBron James and how I see him, now that he's no longer in the Heat, he can, kick rocks. But as far as what he was able to accomplish, as far as respecting him as a player, I mean, he's amazing. I mean, amazing.
For sure, and that's interesting. I didn't expect it to go. I didn't expect your answer to go that way. I figured as somebody who watched him up close, I feel like you would have been on one side of the fence or the other. Like, no, I can't stand him, or no, I love him. As far he could do no wrong in my eyes. I mean, I know some Heat fans that really are on one side of the fence or the other. So I haven't. It's a great perspective to have. Of while he was here, I loved him because he was great. But now that he's not here, who cares?
Yep.
I hope I don't get that way from Marcus Smart, though. That's what I.
That's a huge loss for Boston. A lot of people, they don't look at Smart as a all-star level player or the head of a basketball team, but what he brings with the intangibles, the energy. I mean, I would love to have Marcus Smart with the Miami Heat. I think he would fit very well with the way they
It'd be a
approach games
perfect.
from a defensive minded standpoint. Bringing that grit, that attitude. But I think that's going to hurt Boston a lot more than they think when it's all said and done.
I do too. But here's the thing. I don't really care. I
Okay.
don't really care because here's the thing. So like your perspective on LeBron, and that's why I'm bringing this up, right? Obviously LeBron and Marcus Smart not even remote, not even in the same universe in terms of legacy and player, right? But it's more of the culture, right? Like LeBron changed the entire culture of the Miami Heat for those few years, and then as soon as he left, it was a different feel to it.
Right.
Now, Marcus Smart, I agree with you. I mean, the grit, the toughness, the leadership, like all that was important. But I swear to you, if I would have seen one more half a second left in the game, Marcus Smart 3-pointer, I would have probably tried to kill somebody. Like, I can't do it anymore. Like, I can't. Like, you're telling me that all these great stars, your DeMar DeRozans, your LeBrons, your Steph Currys, your Kawhi Leonards, your all these guys, some find the ball in their hands last couple seconds of the game, and no matter how many guys are on them, they're taking that shot because that's their job. Jimmy Butler, another one.
Oh yeah.
And yet 90% of the time, Jaylen Brown's not getting the ball, Jason Tatum's not getting the ball, Derek White's not getting the ball. Nobody's getting the ball except the worst three-point shooter known to man. That's who's getting the ball every single time. You can't tell me that every NBA defense is that good. You just can't. You can't convince me. I'm sorry, you just can't. So for me, look, I love Marcus Smart and his leadership and everything that he did for the culture of the Celtics. Something needed to change, or I was going to lose my mind. Like, if we had kept the ship together and we had lost to Miami next year, I would have been like, hey, what happened to, fool me once, it's on me, fool me twice, it's on, or fool me once, it's on you, fool me twice, on whatever the frick it is. I don't know. But, well, you just fooled me 3 times. So, like, what are you doing? Figure it out. But yeah, that's just kind of where I was at with that. Like, I saw the trade and I was like, you know what? Good. Fine. Good. Let's get some new stuff in here. And you know what? If it stinks, at least we tried something else. Fine.
Yeah,
I'm cool with
system. But it's funny how you talk about Marcus Smart the way you do, because that's how I feel about Antoine Walker when he was with the Heat. Every time he stepped in those tippy-toed threes, God, my fist would clench. I'm like, no, and then we, of course, 1 out of 8, he would, make it and hit a 3 for the Heat. But I'm just like, golly, every time he would let go of a shot, I was just, why is this guy shooting on our behalf right now?
Yeah, I feel like we're responsible for that as Celtics fans. Sorry about that. He kind of he was on a team where he was the only one who could basically play basketball for a little while. And so he got in his head, hey, I'm good enough. I can take all these shots.
Yep.
And you know what? Confidence comes with that, and so that's great. But yeah, once he got to Miami, he needed to chill a little bit there. But it had already been ingrained in him, so I feel like that's on us. Sorry about that.
Thank you. No, we appreciate
for all those just grit your teeth and bear it moments. So that's awesome, though. No, I appreciate that perspective. I do want to talk a little bit about the hat that you're wearing. Obviously, the Miami Dolphins kind of pivot a little bit towards them. The Miami Heat, speaking of pivot, there you go. Good. Yeah, I don't really know how to feel about the Dolphins as a Patriots fan, as I'm sure you know. I'm all Boston everything, just like you're all Miami everything. So unfortunately, most of our teams are in the same kind of, we're all competitors, right? But it's all well and good. It's all in good fun. Sometimes we'll get the upper hand. Sometimes you'll get the upper hand. It's all been wonderful. But yeah, I don't know how to feel about the Dolphins right now. I didn't give the Dolphins enough credit for the Tyreek Hill trade. I actually didn't like the trade at the time, because when you got a guy that basically solely basically solely relies on speed, and he gets up to 30 years old and he's a football player, that scares me a lot. But you know what? I said I think I'd give him 1, maybe 2 good years left, and then he's going to take a step back. I might have to walk that back already, because I didn't see anything to show me that he was going to slow down anytime soon. He's just a genetic freak. But regardless of that, how are you feeling about this upcoming season in what used to be what I called the AFC least? Now I'm going to call it the AFC beast, because you got 4 playoff teams in your division right now. So, how are you feeling about your chances to win the division and win a championship?
Well, first of all, I love the analogy, the AFC Beast. I think, in my opinion, that the AFC East is probably the strongest division in all of the NFL. Solid
outside of maybe the NFC East. The NFC East is pretty darn good too.
I don't know, man. I think the Patriots, are better than Washington. I think, Buffalo and Miami and the Jets could be better than Dallas and the Giants and Philly. I think Buffalo, Philly, are pretty equal in that perspective. But to be honest with you, man, I have not watched the Miami Dolphins physically with my own eyes in a Super Bowl ever, which you can't say the same with your Patriots run. We're staring at Tom Brady and the Patriots for 18 years. It was like the longest 20 years of my life. But at the end of the day, I don't know. I don't know. We joke around with all my friends. We have, like I said, we have group chats with all the guys, and we talk during the games and stuff. And I tell everyone this whole thing where, hey, the Dolphins are great, but Tua needs to stay healthy. Hey, the Dolphins are wonderful, but if Tua stays healthy, that's going to come down. That's it. I mean, that there's no other questions about it. You've got a great offensive minded coach in McDaniels. You've got Vic that they just signed up on a DC side of things. You picked up Ramsey. You've got Xavier Howard on the other side. You've got great linebackers, a hell of a defensive line by picking up Chubb, and you have Christian Wilkins from over here in Clemson, locally, where we're in our backyard. I I don't see a weakness on the team from top to bottom except for the quarterback position, and that scares the crap out of me because yeah, every team is one major injury away from risking their whole season. But the quarterback position, you have to have some durability. I mean, I was actually just reading an article the other day. Burrow's been hit more than any quarterback in the last couple of years. He pops right back up and he's right back at it again and playing at a Pro Bowl level. Um, so you see these guys, like Aaron Rodgers, or you see guys, that are getting hit, and especially at his age, and bounce back up. How Tua continues to have the injuries that he has baffles me. And I've got a few friends that fight in the UFC that have told me relentlessly, once you're prone to concussions, it's going to continue to happen, and it's going to happen easier every single time. So I think if Tua can stay upright and he can do what he's been doing with the weapons he has at his disposal and can stay healthy, I think the Dolphins can make a hell of a damn run and be the first time. I mean, I was a little kid. I was 5 years old when the Dolphins played the 49ers in 1984, and I heard it in my mom's car radio. Never seen the Dolphins in the Super Bowl. So for them to make a run, I mean, shoot, the Panthers did it with the finals. The Heat did it with the in the NBA. Now, Messi's with the soccer team. The Marlins are in the wild card. I'm like, Dolphins, step up, man. Let's go. Let's go.
Let's go. Yeah, for sure. No, obviously, I hope that doesn't happen. But I'm sure it's much more likely. It's much more likely that it will happen for you than it will happen for the Patriots team, who have basically unanimously decided that wide receivers are for suckers, and the Patriots ain't no suckers. So that's basically what we've decided. Where the Bills have 15 wide receivers that they can use, including a top 5 wide receiver in football. The Dolphins have 15 wide receivers they can use, including, in my mind, hot take here, 2 top 10 wide receivers in the NFL. Yes, I'm that big of a fan of Jalen Waddle. I was that big of a fan of him coming out of college. And when he got drafted to Miami, I went, I hate life. I don't like it at all. But it's fine. And then, the Jets basically have spent first-round picks on wide receivers and spent all this money. Now, has it worked out all the time? No, but they're at least trying. And we've got Devontae Parker.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Kendrick. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate you giving us the scraps of the guy who wouldn't have made your team anyway. Thank you. Nothing like our number 1 wide receiver being this guy who would be the 4th wide receiver on any other team in our division. It's fine. And so, yeah, again, I don't know what they're doing, but it's more likely to happen for you than it is for me this year. So, you know what? Valhalla, man, good luck. And I really hope Tua does stay healthy, because I gave Tua a lot of crap, man. I've given Tua so much junk. I loved him coming out of college. I loved the way he played at Alabama. I thought the fact that he stepped up, having never played, basically, and carrying them to a national championship run, I mean, just amazing to just come off the bench and do that in Alabama when you got all that pressure on you as a 19-year-old or 20-year-old kid. It's incredible what he did. But then he got to the NFL, and you could probably attest to this. It was like his arm was gone. Like he couldn't throw a 10-yard out route most of the time. I literally watched a game, and maybe you didn't. I don't know if you saw this game that I'm talking about. I think it was 2 years ago. I wasn't last year, because last year he played better. But I think it was 2 years ago. I watched Dolphins Patriots. The Dolphins ended up winning this game, which infuriates me. But I literally saw Jalen Waddle run an 8-yard out. Tua two-hopped it to him. Mm-hmm. He didn't short hop it. He skipped it twice on an 8-yard out route, and I went, dude, this guy doesn't have an arm. Like, what happened? And then all of a sudden last year he gets Tyreek Hill, and he goes, oh, I think I just was, I'm okay. And then just starts launching him, and it's like, oh, there it is. That just great, sure.
I know I'm gonna butcher it, and I'm whoever's listening to this right now is gonna probably go, you're out of your mind. But I look at Tua very similarly as Tebow. What he was able to accomplish in college was spectacular, both with both careers. And all of a sudden, when Tebow gets to the NFL, it's like, what happened, dude? You can't hit a 10-yard pass. Tua, I'm not putting him in the bucket as far as the ability. I think Tua has more ability than Tebow does. I'm just saying, as far as the shock, as far as when he first started, you're going, what is going on? I mean, what happened? Is the ball bigger? I mean, is the ball game faster? What transpired? Now, what happened last year? I mean, Tua looked amazing. I mean, when you have guys like Tyreek Hill that get open as fast as they do, there were some times that he couldn't even catch him. I mean, he was throwing his lobs and he was, underthrowing them because these guys are just so fast. But the timing, the accuracy, the QBR, I mean, everything was just, I mean, Tua, when he was healthy, again, using that term, he was at the top of the charts, top 3, top 5 quarterback in the league. The issue here is remaining healthy. But going back to your comment with Tyreek Hill, he actually made a comment as far as saying, "How I'm going to be here 4 years. After the 4 years, I'm retiring." So we've got 3 years with him. We've got a couple more years, obviously, with Waddle, and hopefully, not overpaying with him when his contract is up. But give us very small windows. So if you're the Dolphins, and I've said this to my uncle, to my friends, I'd have Brady on line one. Stay healthy, keep the arm nice and nice and warm. And then if God forbid something happens to Tua, you've got a guy that hopefully already knows the offense. It's a plug and play. He's mature. The game comes a lot slower for him. He's a GOAT, but you don't want to blow these years and this talent on a guy that could potentially, be hurt again and miss a significant amount of time.
Yeah, for sure. And I think on line 2, somebody's got to track down Andrew Luck and tell him that Miami's the place to be. Oh, Andrew Luck, I love that guy. Anyway, so yeah, no, that's really an awesome perspective, man. I genuinely, I like to mess around, and I like to obviously just kind of joke around with people who are fans of rival teams. But I think other than the Yankees, I have no hate in my heart for any team. Really, well, the Jets. I hate the Jets. I do really hate the Jets. But I think the hatred of the Jets is just more out of laughter than anything. I don't even think at this point it's like a genuine hatred. I think it's just more fun to just watch them suffer. It's just more. Well, hey, but they got Aaron Rodgers this year, so I might be the one suffering. But you know what? It's been like 20 years. They can have a little bit. That's okay. I'm all right with it. But yeah, no, I genuinely I do like. Most of the time, I just want to watch good sports. Like if the Dolphins come out this year and start tearing it up, and Tua's going to throw for 5,000 yards and he stays healthy, and Jalen Waddle, 1,800 yards on 115 catches and 10 touchdowns, and Tyreek's got 80 catches for 1,800 yards because he's going deep all the time, and whoever you got at tight end now, I forget who the heck is your tight end now.
We dropped Gesicki. Gesicki went to your team.
He did, yes. I'm excited about that. I like Gesicki a lot. I didn't think you guys used him enough. But,
great guy, great.
Yeah, he just can't. He's a revolving door as a blocker, so that's a problem. But hey, whatever. It is what it is. We got enough blocking guys. We'll be all right. But anyway, no, I genuinely, like, most of the time I just want to watch good football, and if the Dolphins play up to their talent, it's going to be a lot of good football all year. I mean, we got to play. I mean, think about it. You got to play the Patriots twice. You got to play the Bills twice. You got to play the Jets twice. That's 6 games right there that are just going to be barn burners.
And behind,
and we're playing the NFC East this year. So you got to play the Eagles. You got to play the Cowboys. You got to play the Giants. You got to play the Commanders. All really good teams.
Oh yeah.
I don't know who else you guys are playing this year, but it's going to be a lot of fun.
Playing the Chiefs, playing the Panthers. We got a bunch of big matchups. As a matter of fact, just received a notification a couple of days ago. Besides the Eagles, we have the second most difficult schedule in the league. And I'm going, guys, come on, throw us a bone. But to your point, yeah, I mean, we've got a very difficult schedule. Going back to what you mentioned about the Jets, I think that's the biggest wild card or question mark there is, because on paper, with Bryce Hall coming back, hopefully he comes back okay from his injury. You have Aaron Rodgers in the mix. You've got the receivers like Wilson, I think, are going to take a major leap forward with Aaron Rodgers on the team. The defense is lights out. They too could make a hell of a damn run. There are a lot of teams in our division and within our conference. I think the AFC is a hell of a lot stronger than the NFC that can really make a run. You got the Bengals, you got the Chiefs, Dolphins, Bills. You know, the Ravens even to a certain extent. So it's going to be interesting to see how things go. But I can't wait, man. It's almost football season.
Almost. We're almost there. I want to transition a little bit back to basketball, but not necessarily on the court. Although obviously it's always a little bit on the court when it comes to that. But I want to talk about Eric Spoelstra. He's made a big impact on a lot of people's lives in Miami, and so I want to know what kind of impact he's left on yours.
Let me tell you, when he, I'm not sure how familiar you are with his background and his story. He literally started in a video room editing tape game film for Pat Riley and for Stan Van Gundy. I mean, he started from the bottom, and when he got the opportunity to coach, to be completely transparent, I'm going, who the hell's this guy? And it took a while for him to get rolling. But we were very spoiled. We had Pat Riley for a number of years. We had Stan Van Gundy that made a nice little run, and then we had Riles back for half a season. And then when Spo came in, especially dealing with what he did in the beginning with a star like Dwayne Wade and having that weapon in his arsenal, then all of a sudden, a handful of years later, you get LeBron, Chris Bosh, and like we talked about a little earlier, to go on the run that he did. I think he has matured as a coach. I think he has sharpened his pencil quite a bit. And in my opinion, I think he's a top 10 coach of all time. What he's been able to do game in, game out, adjusting, utilizing his weapons. I mean, we talked about it during your show a little while ago. Miami Heat as a roster does not scare very many people. You talked about Duncan Robinson. You talked about, having Josh Richardson. You talked about, Kevin Love. You talked about Caleb Martin. These guys are not world beaters. I mean, these guys are, they're role players. And for him to squeeze the juice out of these oranges and get as much as he gets from these players, and especially undrafted players, they've got a couple other guys in Highsmith and a couple other guys they're looking at right now, plus the rookies that we're developing in our summer league. And for him to get the results that he gets every single time, every single year, no matter who's on the squad, I mean, you got to give him credit. I mean, I'm very grateful to have him. I trust him, even if the Heat hit a little bit of a slump or lose a few games. You have the confidence that, hey, they'll right the ship, and you got to give him credit.
For sure, yeah. And speaking of summer league, I did watch some Heat summer league. I know they played the Celtics one game. I definitely caught that game, obviously. But
Yeah.
man, you guys have a center. I don't know why I'm thinking his name's Allen Robinson, but that's the wide receiver for Orlando Robinson. That's what it was. Yeah, yeah. So I liked him a lot. I thought that he had a really good summer league, and I wouldn't be. I mean, who's your backup five right now? I mean, you got is Zeller still around?
Zeller's gone. Zeller, I think, if I'm not mistaken, with the Mavericks. We lost. He's a gigantic guy. Yurts, another 7'2" guy. He took off. We lost. Struess and Matt and what do you call this guy? Oh man, Gabe. I call him Honest Gabe Vincent. So you have lost some talent. You have lost some depth, but like I said, man, they find a way. They find a way to fill out the roster, and everyone buys in.
Yeah, I like oh gosh, I'm gonna butcher his name. Jamie Jacques Jr. Is that it?
Yeah, JJJ, right? Triple J. Yeah.
The other Triple J. The real Triple J just won Defensive Player of the Year. I think he can keep the Triple J phrase for now. But yeah, no, I like I think a lot of young guys are gonna have to step up for the Heat this year. Jovic is gonna have to play some minutes. I'm not gonna lie to you, man. I watch him and I don't get it. Like, I don't get what the hype is.
With Jovic?
Jovic, yeah.
Well, he's a lot. What they're comparing him to in Miami, he's a lot like a Dirk Nowitzki. He's about a 6'11" stretch forward. He can shoot real well. He did have a couple of solid games during the summer league. I'm not sure if it was against Boston, but he did play pretty well against Portland and a couple other teams. And he's a stretch forward, which I know in the league right now, especially having the ability to shoot a 3-pointer and having some size is a big deal. The one that's going back to what we talked about when you first opened the show with the Lillard trade, my concern is these guys are going to want 2 or 3 picks and probably take JJJ and Jovic, Jovic. I guess I'm butchering his name right now. And then you lose more of that depth, you lose more of that cheap labor, for lack of a better word. But no, I'm excited with some of the rookies. I love Orlando Robinson. I think he'd make a great backup to Bam. And like I said, the program once the clock strikes 12 and training camp begins, I think that Miami Heat culture and the way that they approach things, you're going to find out that we might identify maybe another gem that could potentially, help us
Sure.
start another run. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And then that's always the thing, the Patriots are a lot like that too, where like, you sit there and you go, they don't have anybody, and then somehow they find some undrafted corner to be a Pro Bowler for 5 years, and you're like, all right, yeah, what the hell do I know? Like, and it seems to happen like every like 2 or 3 years. Like right now, we're on a Jones kick. I mean, we got Jack Jones, Jonathan Jones,
Yep.
Marcus Jones, how many Mac Jones, our quarterback. How many other Joneses do we have? I don't know, but it's pretty interesting that the Heat do end up just kind of finding these guys and are able to develop them in a way that not only do you get the most out of them, but you can get the most out of them all at once, because that's a tough thing to do too. Is you might find like how do you develop Max Struess, like for instance, right? How do you develop Max Struess, who is essentially the same player as Duncan Robinson, and
Mm-hmm.
who is essentially the same kind of player as Tyler Hero, although Tyler Hero is a little bit more dynamic, obviously. He scores 25 points a night. I mean, clearly he's better, but similar style of player where, not great on defense, pretty much a 3-point shooter, good off ball guy. He's developed his on ball stuff too. But like, you have all three of these guys at the same time. How are you going to develop Max Struess when you've got two other guys that essentially do the exact same thing, but they figure out a way to do it?
You find a
So
way.
it's pretty incredible for sure.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely, man. Like I said, I have no complaints. A lot of these guys, they're no namers. You kind of meet them the first quarter of the year, and you're going, "Who's this clown that they just brought on board?" And then all of a sudden, they contribute, and everyone knows their role, and everyone's rowing in the same direction.
So, Eddie, transitioning to that other sign that's behind you there, the Miami Hurricanes. I want to start there because, man, that's probably the topic of conversation that we've discussed a little bit before we hopped on here that I know about the least. I stopped paying attention to the Miami Hurricanes, again, no offense, around 2004. I think at that point, after that, it just kind of becomes a little bit sad. So I just wanted to kind of get your take as somebody who's watched all different incarnations of the Miami Hurricanes team, and get your perspective on that era of the Miami Hurricanes, which is that late '90s to early 2000s, just the absolute juggernaut Hurricanes with all these famous players, right? In different years, Ed Reed, Ray Lewis, Jeremy Shockey, Willis McGahee, all these unbelievable guys that were out there. So give me your perspective on that.
Yeah, much like what we talked about earlier with LeBron and Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade in that era, and how grateful you are to have experienced that and to have viewed those guys on your team and help your team, win games. The Hurricanes, I mean, I've watched the Hurricanes since I was 5 years old, probably even earlier than that. I mean, I remember watching as a kid, 6, 7, 8 years old, crying when they would lose. I mean, am a 1,000% Miami Hurricane fan. But at the end of the day, like we talked about earlier, jokingly, since their last championship run, they've been absolutely 1,000% irrelevant. And what's crazy is that you're in probably one of the best recruiting hotbeds in the entire country. You've got donors, you've got a history, with players that come back and pay homage to where they went to school and attend games and attend what do you call them, practices and recruiting parties and stuff. And at the end of the day, they just can't get over the hump. But again, I remember watching the mid '80s, when they came out in the fatigues, and I mean, the swagger, the attitude. Nobody was going to beat you that day. I mean, you knew Miami was going to win. So to go from that and then transition over, like you mentioned, in my opinion, and I'm biased, so don't judge me. Whoever's listening, don't judge me. But in my opinion, the 2001 Miami Hurricanes will go down as the best college football squad ever. The talent that was on that team, what they were able to accomplish, winning 44 games in a row, to get to the game at where they finally ended up beating the Nebraska Cornhuskers and winning a championship. I mean, that squad was just deep, and you don't see that nowadays. Nowadays the guys want to follow that NIL money, or they want to start, or they want the instant gratification. And like you said earlier when we were talking offline, I mean, you had Clinton Portis with McGahee right behind him, with Frank Gore right behind him. You had Kellen Winslow, with Shockey in front of him and with, Greg Olson behind him. And you had, Santana Moss and Reggie Wayne and all these guys that said, you know what, I'm going to put my ego to the side. Even though we got talent, we're just going to wait our turn. It was just spectacular. I mean, that era was great. Unfortunately, since 2003, 2004, it's just been downhill. And but again, I'm a Miami guy through and through, as you can see up here. I love the Hurricanes, love my team. But I'm in one of those positions right now, especially with the way that they've been talking the talk. Show me on the field. Let's win some games, and then we'll let the victories do the talking versus all this hype during the off season.
Yeah, and unless I'm mistaken, which I could be, Patriot legend Vince Wilfork was also around in that era, right? For Miami?
2000, yeah, about 99 to 2001 or so, 99, 2002. Great guy. Great guy.
Amazing.
He would anchor that defensive line.
For sure. And he was the anchor of ours as well.
Oh, yeah.
Was he that big in college? I got to ask. I got to know. He was humongous, dude.
he was literally the back of a freight train. I mean, he was as wide as you would see on TV. I think he put on a few more pounds when he joined the Patriots, but as big as you can get. He reminded me a lot of Warren Sapp when I watched him, how he would take up so much space every time that the ball was hiked.
Another Miami legend, yeah.
Hey, I don't know how that worked out. But no, the way that Wilfork would take on every play, he was taking on two guys. I mean, it's insane, So obviously, it would create holes for the linebackers to kind of swoop through, and those guys, talked him up because he was an intricate part of some of those championship runs.
Absolutely. I do want to ask you quickly about another Miami Hurricanes legend. Where does Dwayne Johnson rank in terms of talented players in that Miami and those Miami defenses? Is he towards the bottom? He's towards the bottom, isn't he?
If he's listening right now, or if he ever gets hold of this footage, I'm coming after you after he kills me. No, and listen, as far as him being part of the team and repping the University of Miami and what he's been able to accomplish and donate as far as, from a funding standpoint, I mean, you can't ask for anything more. I mean, he's a great guy, totally gives back to the school, always reps, especially when we're somewhat relevant and it's a big game, but ultimately great guy. Football player, I wouldn't say he's at the bottom of the barrel or one of the worst Hurricanes ever play. He just wasn't impactful. His name didn't come up much. Yeah, he was just a contributor, but he wasn't like an all-star level player like some of the guys we mentioned a few minutes ago.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, obviously that question was more of just sarcasm than anything. But what I don't want to talk about with sarcasm, the last thing I want to talk about today is, in my opinion anyway, a very underrated era in Miami history, just based on the fact that obviously LeBron kind of came around and that was the real pinnacle of Miami's success, I think. But before that, you had a different era. You had the Shaquille O'Neal and Dwayne Wade era, or probably more realistically, the Dwayne Wade and Shaquille O'Neal era, because I feel like at that point, Shaq was the number two. But man, you had the Big Diesel in your on your team in his prime. I don't know, maybe not quite in his prime, maybe like right after. He's starting to slow down a little bit. He's starting to put on some pounds at that point. I mean, he was never a small guy, but I had Shaq. We had Shaq for a year, and I think at that point, that's when his knees went from like dog bones to paper mache, and then he retired. I feel like at least with you guys, I think he still had human being bones and human being muscles, which is good. Yeah. So what kind of stands out to you about that era? As you kind of had to watch it every day. I didn't watch it every day at that point. I mean, 2006, 2007. I'd have been 10 years old. So I don't remember a whole lot about it. So from your perspective, what do you remember about that era more than anything?
A couple things, first and foremost, I think when Shaq joined the Miami Heat, that's when the trajectory of the Heat just took a whole nother level, kind of similar to what you mentioned with Damian Lillard and what's going to be required to receive him or to trade back for him. That's what we gave up for Shaq. I mean, we gave Caron Butler, Brian Grant. We gave up some serious players to bring in Shaq, and like you mentioned, he was not in his prime. This wasn't Shaq Kobe against the Kings, Chris Webber Shaq. This was a guy that I think still had plenty of juice left in the tank. but he was definitely on more on the decline versus the ascending in his career. And by the way, others, I know you like your stats because I know you're on top of your game when it comes to that. But I read an article a couple of days ago. Since 2006, in the Eastern Conference, no one's been to the finals more than the Miami Heat.
Yep.
That's incredible, incredible. But yeah, starting with 2006, he won the championship that year. Dwayne Wade was playing lights out. Much like the Celtics and Heat and that rivalry there, and much like the Knicks and Heat in the 90s, those battles, the Heat had to get over the Detroit Pistons. I mean, they were a thorn in our butt with Rasheed Wallace and Ben Wallace and Rip Hamilton and Chauncey. So that first year, I think, the expectations were through the roof. I mean, I've lived in Miami my whole life until I moved to Greenville, South Carolina, a few years back. And I can tell you, I've watched the Marlins win a World Series. I've watched the Hurricanes win national championships. The Dolphins obviously did what they did. And I've never seen a welcome party for any other player the way that they welcome Shaquille O'Neal. You mentioned Diesel. He shows up in a diesel truck, spraying everybody with a gigantic water gun. And it was just impactful. You didn't think it was that big of a deal, when you look at it from 30,000 feet. But at that era, that was a huge deal. Shaquille O'Neal left LA with the run that they had to come to Miami with Pat Riley and go on his run. Excuse me. That was a big deal. So, obviously it took a year to, get past the Pistons and go through that. But the run that they had in 2006 with Dwayne Wade was out of control. I mean, he was just on fire. The shots he was making, the play he was, aggressive, dunking on folks. I mean, driving hard to the basket, always, landing on the ground almost after every play. And then having the guys like we mentioned earlier, Antoine Walker and Gary Payton and Jason Williams, that all kind of contribute and help him get over the hump. I mean, it was a hell of a run. So in my mind, Shaq is right up there.
Yeah. It's so funny because like my wife, whom I love I love more than anything in the world. She's just not a sports person, and that's okay. That there's nothing wrong with not being a sports person. Some people just don't connect to it. But it is so funny to see people like her or people that are, even younger than I am, that just if they don't know about sports or if they're significantly younger than me, they look at Shaquille O'Neal as this big, funny guy that does all these funny commercials, and he's a DJ sometimes, and he's in these movies, and he's doing all these comedies, right? And that's great. But it's hilarious to me that that's how a lot of people look at Shaquille O'Neal now, when no matter how many comedies the guy does, and no matter how many funny things he says or how many interviews he does, I cannot get out of my brain watching him like ruin people's lives and just be such a monster. Like, for those of you watching at home that never saw Shaquille O'Neal play, and you hear, superlatives like the most dominant player ever, that doesn't mean anything to you, but it's true. I mean, this man they had to change how they built backboards because Shaquille O'Neal would not stop breaking backboards.
Oh yeah.
It wasn't on purpose. He just was that aggressive when he would go to the hole.
Oh,
There's a reason why it's called a hack-a-shack. It's because you couldn't stop him unless you just annihilated him. And you just like, it amazing that people nowadays just look at Shaquille, and it's not their fault necessarily. He's just been out of the game that long. And even, he was in the game for like 5 years and he wasn't really doing a whole lot because injuries were just slowly tearing him apart. But we've been so far removed from his real prime. I mean, 15 plus years removed from his real prime. So anybody in that age range or anybody that's not a basketball fan just looks at Shaquille O'Neal and is like, oh, he's just a real funny guy. No, he is an animal. I mean, probably one of the more like just anger-filled athletes I've ever seen. Have you heard that story that he told about David Robinson, where like he was like it was I don't know if he was on the Magic at this point or if he was on the Lakers at that point. I can't remember. But he tells a story about how like they were facing David Robinson and the Spurs, and he made up a story in his own head that when he was a kid, David Robinson didn't sign his autographs, and he just made it up. Like, it was not at all true. David Robinson never did that to Shaquille O'Neal, but Shaquille O'Neal convinced himself of this lie so that he could manufacture enough anger to dominate David Robinson. It makes no, like, he was an absolute psychopath when he played basketball, but now he's just the funny guy. So I just find that interesting. Do you kind of look at it that way too? Like, where you just see Shaq as that animal, and nowadays it's like, man, is that even the same guy?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree. My kids, whenever they watch him on TV, you think the funny guy that sells Papa John's pizza or rubs a Gold Bond on his
Right.
elbow. But at the end of the day, no, I agree with you completely. I mean, I guess it was he started in 95, 96, 97. So I graduated high school in 97. That's how old I am. And he was absolutely unstoppable. I mean, unstoppable. If he was within 3 feet of the rim, you were going to end up posterized or at the bottom of that slam. No, he was incredible. I mean, what he was able to do at such a young age, and when he first came into the scene from LSU, he wasn't even as big as he was when he really hit his prime with the Lakers. I mean, he was a pretty lanky. Had some size, had some strength, but dude, I had never. I mean, I'm not that old, but I've never watched anyone, in the 60s or 70s or 80s break glass the way that he did. Every dunk, it was a fear that, he was going to shatter a backboard at some point. Like you said, they had to change the way that they actually, hung the baskets and everything to make sure there was more stability to absorb a guy of that size, dunking the basketball. I mean, it was mind boggling. When he went to the Lakers, I remember the run they had with Kobe and all that. And he was, I mean, averaging more than 30 points a game. You were not going to stop him unless, like you said, you were going to foul him and then force him to shoot a free throw to win the game. And he was just out of this world, out of this world.
Absolutely. Well, Eddie, seriously, I know I've said this to you off camera and I said it to you in the podcast, but dude, it has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on. And I will give you one more chance. If there's anything that you want to say to the people out there, whether it's about your business, whether it's just about any of the teams or anything we talked about, you want to talk more smack about the Celtics, the camera's yours, man. Go for it. Whatever you've got, let it out.
No, Tyler, I appreciate you having me on, and it was a blast to go down memory lane and talk a little bit about Miami sports. I know for you it must have been torture to listen to me talk about teams that you despise, but it was a lot of fun, and I look forward to doing it again very soon.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. And by the way, like I said earlier, other than the Yankees and the Jets, I don't have any hatred for any team. I don't hate the Miami Heat. I don't hate the Marlins or the Dolphins. I don't hate any of them. So, I'm all about good athletes, good team sports, and Miami has a lot of it, and I can't deny it. So it's you guys have had an amazing history. And again, I know we're wrapping it up here, but the thing to remember is the Miami Heat are not a franchise that's been around since the 1910s, like the Celtics. They've been around since what, the early 90s,
80s.
80s, yeah. So like not a pretty reasonably new franchise by comparison to a lot of other teams. So amazing that you guys have had so much success in such little time. It doesn't get talked about enough. But Eddie, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. And like you said, I hope we can do this again real soon, man.
Absolutely, man. Glad to be on here. Thanks again for your time.
Yes, sir. And thank you guys all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.